Good day, friends. I'm back with another great sourdough recipe. This is going to be a olive sourdough. And we're going to start off with 400 grams of water. And to that 400 grams of water, we are going to add 110 grams of sourdough starter. Now this sourdough starter has been sitting out for about 8 hours. I usually feed my sourdough the night before and let it sit out anywhere from 8 to 12 hours. And this one's not quite at its peak, but I have a really healthy sourdough starter, so it will do just fine. You have a pretty big window of time when it comes to using your starter. It's not just when it's at its peak. You can also use it just before or shortly after. Now you're going to want to mix your starter into the water until it becomes a milky consistency. And you'll see that's what I'm doing here. And then we're going to begin to add a flour blend. I use 3 different flours in my sourdough. And 2 of the flours are from a local mill, Cairn Springs, which is in Burlington, Washington. And I start off with 100 grams of Glacier Peak bread flour. And then the next flour I'm going to add is going to be Trailblazer T85, and I'm going to put in 150 grams of that flour. And then the last flour that I'm going to add is going to be 300 grams of King Arthur flour. And I've just found that I get better consistency with my sourdough with a flour blend versus just using one. And it's not just consistency, but it's also flavor. You get an enhanced flavor by using different flours. So I suggest you try some and see what you like when you make your sourdough. And then I also add a dough conditioner, which I'm going to show you. It's Diastatic Malted Powder, and that just helps with the fermentation and the dough consistency. And I just put a tablespoon of that. And then I add my salt. And for this recipe, I'm putting in 12 grams of salt. Just letting that trickle in. And once you have all of your ingredients in the bowl, then I begin to mix it with the wooden spoon. And you can take it off the scale once you've mixed everything. So I get the mixing started, and then once I get the dough to pull together, I'm going to use a bowl scraper to bring the dough together. You'll see it's coming together nicely. And there's a bowl scraper. I'm just going to scrape off the dough off the wooden ladle or utensil. And then just scrape the ends of the bowl to try to clean up the sides of it. And then once I've brought it together, I am going to dip my hand in some water and start just mixing the dough with my hand. I find mixing the dough with my hand is the best way to determine whether or not additional water is needed. You don't want to have any dry spots in your dough. So I'm going to dip my hands a few times in water and then just squeeze the dough and bring it together and make sure there's just not any dry spots in there. And it takes a few times to get it to come together. And once that is done, I am going to set it in an oven with the light on and let it ferment at least for about an hour. Now I'm coming back after an hour and I'm going to do this first stretch and fold. So I keep water by me and I just dampen my hand as I turn the dough on itself and rotate the bowl. And I do this several times just to bring the dough together. The dough is now well hydrated. And it's looking good. So now I'm just going to flip it over a few times on itself and then put it back in the oven. Now I'm bringing it out for the second stretch and fold, and this is when I add the inclusions. So I'm adding 2 kinds of olives, manzanilla and black olives, and I've just diced those olives. And it's about 1/2 cup. You can certainly add more if you like more olives. And some people add rosemary and garlic as well to their olive loaf, and I've done that. It makes really good bread, but for this one, I'm just going to add the olives. And then I'm going to stretch and fold the dough and work the inclusions in at the same time. And there's my husband asking me a question. Okay, I've got the olives worked into the dough, and I'm going to put it back in the oven for another 30 minutes. And then I'll do another round of stretch and folds. So it's back out of the oven. This is my 3rd stretch and fold. And you can see that the dough's looking really nice. It started to become airy, which means fermentation has started. And usually by the 3rd stretch and fold, that's when I'm going to do a window pane test to see how the gluten is forming. And it actually looks pretty good. It is tearing a little bit on the side, so I am going to do one more stretch and fold. So back in the oven for another 30 minutes, and then I'll bring it back out for one more stretch and fold. Okay, this is what it's looking like after 3 stretch and folds. I'm going to do a final stretch and fold. Just turning the dough on itself, rotating the bowl. And you want to keep your hands wet. That really makes it much easier to work with the dough. Then I'm going to do another window pane test to see what it's looking like. And it's looking good now. No tearing. So I'm calling it good. And it's going to go in the oven with the light on. And it's going to ferment for about 3 hours until it's doubled in size. Now I'm going to get the banneton ready. My dough has been fermenting in the oven for 3 hours and it's ready. So I like to put my own cloth. These bannetons do come with liners, but I use my own, and I'm going to sprinkle some rice flour in the banneton. And actually this is a mix of all-purpose flour and rice flour. You want to make sure to coat the cloth well, otherwise your sourdough will stick, and you don't want that. Now I'm going to sprinkle some of the flour on the counter so that the sourdough doesn't stick on the counter. And look at that, it's looking beautiful. Great fermentation. Now I'm going to turn it out onto the table, and it comes out pretty easily once it's been fermented long enough. Now I like to stretch my dough out into a rectangular shape, and then I fold it like a letter on itself. And then I roll it. Going to rinse my fingers real quick. Adjust the camera so you can see what I'm doing. And then roll the dough. And I'm going to run out of space here. And it didn't quite come together as I had hoped when I first rolled it, but that's okay. Now I can use the bench scraper and bring it together into a round bowl. So I'm going to do that a few times. I'm building tension on the surface of the dough while I do this. And you could just use this method alone and not do the letter fold if you want. You just want to be able to bring the dough together and start building tension on that dough. Now I'm going to let it rest for 20 minutes, and this is what it looks like after 20 minutes. It's rested. I'm going to flour the surface again because I'm going to flip it over and I do not want it to stick. There we go. And just have to wet my fingers. The dough is sticky. And I'm basically going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to fold it like a letter. And then I'm going to roll it. And that's what it should look like. And now I'm going to put it into the banneton. Bring a little bit closer. Flip. Now I let my bread sit in the banneton for about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to stitch it up in a sense. And that just means I'm going to bring the seam together after it's relaxed a little bit. So that's what I'm doing here, just bringing the seams together and building a little bit more tension as well. And then sealing the ends of the dough. That's what it's looking like. It's looking really good. I'm going to put a sprinkling of flour on top. Oh, I missed a seam. Need to close that up. Okay, coating the flour on the top because I'm going to fold the cloth over the dough and I don't want that sticking to it. And then it's going to go in the refrigerator for 2 hours. This is a same day sourdough. You can certainly leave it in the refrigerator for 24 to 48 hours. That will enhance the flavor. But for the purpose of this video, I just put it in for 2 hours. And now I'm going to bake it after 2 hours. And you can see it has continued to rise in the banneton. And it's looking really good. I always put my sourdough on a piece of parchment paper, and then it goes into the oven, in a Dutch oven. And this is my standard score. It's not super fancy, but it looks good on bread. I'm going to give it another sprinkling of flour to enhance the scoring. And then I'm going to use just a toothpick to mark the dough where I want to put the design. And I'm going to use the lame and just do some wheat stalks. 4 in total. This scoring is pretty easy. Nothing too complicated with it. And it comes out really nice. One more to go, and then I'll do the deeper scores. There's 1, and there's 2. Sometimes I go back just to deepen the score a little bit. And then into the Dutch oven. The Dutch oven's been heating in the oven for an hour at 450. And this is after it's baked for 40 minutes, 30 minutes with the lid on and 10 minutes with the lid off. It looks beautiful. Came out really nice. Happy sourdough making.